Hello, my friends. It is I, Rich Filiberto, DM Philly, out here on the internet, your friendly neighborhood podcaster. Very excited to be back with you again to begin our journey this summer as we return to the world of Westeros to talk House of the Dragon Season 2. Season 2, Episode 1 is over, A Son for a Son. And I guess we're just getting started. I am very excited to be joined by my co-host for this, the illustrious, the one and only Stormborn herself, LaTonya Starks. LaTonya, how are you?
I'm so happy to be here. This is great. I get to talk about House of the Dragon, and people will actually have to listen to me. It's
Indeed,
wonderful.
they will. I'm listening, LT. I'm super psyched to have you here break this down because we both got to talk about it over at our alma mater, PSR. But you and I have never actually sat down to formally dissect a Westerosi project. We've talked a little bit around Game of Thrones, but I'm psyched to actually dig into Hot D with you for the next couple of months.
Yeah, we've really gotten into the deep end when it comes to all things Star Wars, but we haven't really had a conversation on air about any of the Song of Ice and Fire or House of the Dragon. So I'm excited to talk about it.
It's a different galaxy far, far away, but one that I am excited to get into with you nonetheless. I'm just going to say the thing off the top. If you guys are listening to us, go hit all the social media buttons. We're at Screen Page Pod in all the places. There are link trees in all of our bios on the social medias. Come find us in the Discord. We're having a lot of fun talking to everybody week to week about all of the TV that we're breaking down, of which there is a lot this June. I'm going to be talking about The Boys Season 4 with Kevin Mahadeo. The Acolyte is airing. I'm breaking it down with Taylor every week. And at the end of the month, LT, you and I are going to talk about The Bear. So I just want to make sure people know that I have all this stuff going on and they should be listening to all of it. Where do you want to start? You want to start in Winterfell? Because I want to start in Winterfell. It felt so good to be home, LaTonya.
Yes.
I got all kinds of verklempt and emotional. This whole opening shot as we track the Raven, and then it's the dragon, and then it's Winterfell. I got chills. I can't believe that it's been long enough that I'm nostalgic about Game of Thrones.
Do I want to talk about the Starks? Is that a question? I love him so much, and I love that this episode opened with a bird's eye view, literally, of Winterfell, and then of us hearing one of the most northern accents that is ever accented throughout history. We thought that Jon Snow's accent was northern, but it's really nice to hear what happened 200 years before,
It's fantastic. I saw a couple people joking around on Reddit while I was kind of scouring the internet and the fallout after this episode, and people just laughing about how great is it that Sean Bean delivered this Ned Stark accent, and now everybody who gets cast in the North basically has to mimic the Sean Bean. That just locked it in as the Northerners' accent. There's a there, I think,
Yeah. It's just knowing what happens in the story years and years from now and what a pivotal role the Starks are going to end up playing in the realm. And then having the foreshadowing. I mean, the wall is back,
Yeah, it is.
Far before it was ceremoniously torn down. And there's evil out there. And those of us who know why Rhaenyra is truly fighting to be on the Iron Throne, and that's to ultimately protect people from a fate worse than death.
The Song of Ice and Fire. I did love the foreshadowing, just the imagery was so awesome to get young Jace, who basically looks just like Jon Snow.
Yeah, thank God that they got rid of that wig.
Oh, for real. Wig watch much improved for season 2. Our friend Josh is going to have much less work to do this season. The hair is looking better across the board. I'm looking at you, Valerian children in particular. Just the whole opening was so great. This is Lord Cregan Stark that we're just meeting. In the book, we get a little bit of context that this guy came to power. His father died when he's 13. He has a younger brother who dies. So this is like a true Stark Northerner. He has been through the the gauntlet. He's
Mhm.
kind of wizened, aged, seasoned before his time in that way. And this whole opening monologue just mirrors Game of Thrones so powerfully. Duty is a sacrifice, it eclipses all things, even blood. All men of honor must pay its price. It's a really good setup to bring us up onto the wall and kind of evoke all those familiar nostalgia member berries. And here we go as the news is going to arrive, and word of the death of young Jace's brother hits him, setting the events of the whole season into motion. I love the little bit of setup here. I know like the book fans were hoping for more time with Cregan Stark and Jace. They develop a kind of friendship in the text that gets alluded to. But I'm curious, do you think we're going to get more flashbacks of this? Does this feel like all we got of Winterfell and we're going to move on?
I hope not. Because those two actors have a lot of chemistry with each
It felt
other.
like it to me too. I'm glad you're feeling that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I've just been watching Interview with the Vampire too much,
Oh
but
my God.
the whole scene, I was just like, kiss,
Interview with the
do it.
Vampire is so good. You guys, it's like a sleeper gem that's on right now. And I will be talking about it once the season wraps.
Oh
But
my goodness, I cannot wait for next week's episode. That's all I will say.
I'm very fired up. We're going to maybe have to talk about that too, LT. I love Interview.
I love
Um,
it so much.
I thought that this was a really great setup, just to get back to the wall. Like I joke, but it really did hit me full force. The Winterfell themes we're evoking the old music again, just the sight of it all. And this Cregan Stark delivery, it so embodies everything that we learned across 7 seasons of Game of Thrones about the Starks.
Mhm.
Like I'm sold on this and I definitely want more of it. I don't know how we're going to manage it in an 8 episode runtime, but I hope that that's not all we got of Winterfell. It felt like some really strong stuff. Worth noting too, new opening credits, LT.
Oh my god, yes.
I adore these opening credits. People who know me know I'm a giant fan of the Wheel of Time. They were very much like the Wheel of Time season 1 credits, which are all about the weaving of a tapestry and
Yes.
weaving these individual threads into the kind of greater picture. But this felt to me like a supreme level up from the bloody rocks of season 1.
Yes. I'm so glad. I saw about a week before the show aired that they were going to be changing the opening credits. And the first thing I could think was yes, because Ariel pointed out in the first season that the music, the theme itself, had been altered.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really pick up on it the first time I listened to it. But then the more often I listened to it, I was like, oh, wow, it doesn't really swell at the time that we're used to the Game of Thrones theme swelling.
Mm-hmm.
So they went back to the original theme and they did this whole tapestry thing, which I think is brilliant because Helena's foreshadowing of things is
Mm-hmm.
always fun to see on this show. And she had that whole moment where she was talking about dragons weaving threads. And this tapestry takes us through the entire history so far of the Targaryens.
It was
So,
just awesome. It looked so good. Like, I know they put a
yeah.
lot of attention to detail and care into those season 1 credits, but gosh, I'm a big fantasy nerd. Like, I've officially read the book more than once, and I could barely track what was happening there. So, to me, it's such a small thing, but I think it belies a really important note, which is that they're willing to change. They're not
Yes.
going to lock themselves into this pattern because I think that Game of Thrones, for all of its successes, it did a lot of great stuff, but it had a lot of catastrophic failures along the way. And it's important that they're able to pivot when they see something that maybe isn't working. It just felt,
Catastrophic failure. Game of Thrones. What do you mean?
how dare I throw in the hyperbole around?
Whatever do you mean?
What could I be talking about? I just really like the sense that I come away from it that, okay, they're willing to adapt. They're not going to like lock themselves in this straitjacket that they think they have to measure up to the loyal fandom of Once Upon a Time. So this drives us into the action here. Here's my girl, the queen that never was, Rhaena Valerian, is rolling in on Mellis as Daemon is immediately trying to give her orders, even though he's not her her boss. This whole exchange, like, please, LT, more of these two. I really like Eve best, but I really
I
like
love
Rhaena
her.
as a character. Just the whole exchange with them is excellent. Excellent.
Rhaenys is just so seasoned in so many different ways. She's been through so much and she understands what it's like to be a mother grieving. And she knows who she is loyal to. It's Rhaenyra who's the queen and not Daemon. And Daemon is just really enjoying playing war. You know what I mean? Like, he is just so out to like do tests of loyalty on everyone that is in his circle. And it's just like they would not be there if they weren't loyal to Rhaenyra. But they don't care what you have to say to tell that what you're trying to tell them. Like, these people are here because they have honor and they don't want to dishonor Rhaenyra in any way, including flying off on Dragonback to capture Aemon Targaryen without her say so. Like, that's just not something that's going to happen.
For real, the whole exchange we have later with the Kingsguard, with the Eric and Eric bid of, I was made a Kingsguard when I was 8 and I came here out of my sense of honor, but what am I supposed to do? Shades of Jaime Lannister, right? That I've
Yeah,
given this oath to protect the king and all his family, but what happens when they all start killing each other, when they become divided? How do I know where
right.
my loyalty is? And we're beginning to hammer away at this theme that we're going to pound on all episode of the boys are a little out of control and the women again and again kind of counseling restraint and measuring the fact that these dragons, once we unleash these things, once we go to war, it will get bad. And flying into King's Landing to kill Vagar, we'll talk a little bit about the dragons because I think it's important that we like count the weapons on the board to a degree.
Yeah.
But there is this response of we have to get Vagar off the board. It is the emotional kind of reaction to the loss of their family and the prince, but it's also very tactical in that Vagar is the biggest, the
Yeah.
baddest, the meanest of the dragons. But Rhaenys is like older and measured and understands that, yeah, great. If two of us go flying into King's Landing to kill him, what's going to be the result there? Maybe we do, but what do we lose for that too? And these deeper implications that the women seem to be thinking about much more predominantly than the men across the episode feels very relevant to everything that we're kind of talking about a dragon war in the Seven
Right.
Kingdoms, right?
The men are just completely ready to go fully scorched earth
Mm-hmm.
on the other side. And they are doing so much plotting and scheming behind the backs of the people that are actually supposed to be in charge that it's ridiculous. And a lot of it to their own glory. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, they want to say that they were the one that killed Vagar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they were the one that killed Aemon Targaryen, or whomever it might be. And Rhaenyra's not even there. She's not even there to give an opinion at this point. So everything we thought happened just as soon as Viserys died, as soon as they learned that Viserys had died. And Rhaenyra is in childbirth, unfortunately. And there is Daemon just planning a war,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, and deciding and issuing oaths of fealty to people. Like, it is out of control, and it only steamrolls ahead into what we see later in the episode.
Oh yeah, exponential chaos. I mean, it speaks back to some of what we got last season, even like with Viserys talking about his reign and the fact that he never distinguished himself. He didn't make note of himself in the history books, and the whole second sons that, Daemon is a
Right,
guy like traditionally a lot of the second sons in actual history, that war is an opportunity to distinguish yourself and to
right.
come away from it with prominence, with a reputation, with this heroism behind you. It's how, the small folk get up jumped and become lords in this way. It's how like a Christian Cole like gets a name for himself out of
Ew.
something. So the idea, I know for real, the idea that these boys again and again, that this is kind of their domain, the domain of battle, that they're so willing to kind of jump into the violence, and the women who have to clean up the aftermath of all that are the ones like, whoa, let's like rein it in a little bit here. I just love the setup of the tension between Rhaenys and Daemon as we get it. And I love that little dragon dock that she gets off with Melis. I like practical design, LT. That felt very reasonable to me.
Yeah. It's great to see all of the different like things they have to accompany the dragons in
Right?
this series
The
because
accoutrements of dragon fighting, yeah.
because Daenerys was just like bareback for life. It defied logic that she wouldn't have had a saddle put on that dragon.
You're speaking to my soul, you know. The first time it makes sense, but at what point? I mean, that was not a comfortable surface. It didn't appear to be. So I just love all of the accoutrements of the dragon riding, you know. Very cool setup. So we talked about her a little bit, Alicent and our boy Christian Cole, as we end up going to King's Landing. We can see that things have evolved quickly. The relationship between the head of the Kingsguard here and the Dowager Queen has evolved a great deal, LT.
I feel like they've been fucking. I knew it. I knew that they were sleeping together. I just knew it. They both have this thing where they want Rhaenyra in one way or another.
True.
And the only way she's gone now, like they had their chances, but she's gone. And the only way that they can have Rhaenyra in their life is to be with each other because they both know Rhaenyra so well.
That's such a fascinating perspective on it. But yeah, you're spot on. I mean, I'm with you.
Yeah, and I mean, like they're even in Rhaenyra's old bed.
Mm-hmm.
It's so weird.
So it sounds to me like your read is that like this is not a new state of affairs, that this has been going on for a minute. That's your read.
I feel like they've been way too close. I could see an argument for how pious Alicent is and her saying, okay, we'll wait until Viserys is like officially gone.
Sure.
I can see that. But I think it's way more interesting if they have just been talking about duty and sacrifice constantly, but they've been with each other the whole time.
Christian Cole's he's literally the worst. He's just the worst.
He is just an incel.
Yes.
He's every incel who was ever jettisoned by a woman.
Worse, he's an incel with power too. There is a lot there. I mean, I don't want to spoil the books too much, right? But the context of the books that's really important is that it's this third party exploration of the history as recounted by, and the two prominent kind of sources for this history are Master Orwyle, who is the maester currently amongst the Greens and is present on the show at the Small Council, right? And the Dwarf Mushroom, who is ultimately like a jester, right? That is often in Rhaenyra's court. So it's really important, and the context gets like conveyed to us a lot in the book that Orwyle in particular is framing events given his involvement in them, because he's an active participant in everything that's going on. So it changes the way that we have to look at what we're being told in the text. In the text, Alicent and Christian, this is not a thing that is presented to us on paper. So I know a lot of fans are responding to it differently. And I think that there's a really charitable read here where you can look at Alicent as somebody that has ultimately had no life for herself. She's had no agency. None. She was a total, a pawn in her father's game to assert power. She was sold off like a broodmare in the way that women in this, canon are treated. And it's this really brutal experience where she does have a loving husband, at least. Viserys is a kind man, but that's not any young girl's ideal of growing up and finding a life. So this is the first moment where she has autonomy and agency to pursue a relationship of her own accord. In certain ways, it's like her first relationship or like her being a teenager again. And there's something very juvenile about it that I think I can empathize with, even though it makes them both look pretty bad in terms of the hypocrisy,
Yeah, the hypocrisy aside, because that's definitely there.
Yes. Yes, it is.
you can completely understand why these two people would be drawn to one another, given the past that they've had and the fact that they can't really make any decisions for themselves.
Mhm.
Um, I there's a part of me that does feel for Alicent because she was thrust into this life as a very young child,
Mhm.
and uh, all of the sex that she's had probably in her life has been to some extent against her will
It's about
until
duty, right? It's
yeah,
about this obligation that she has pressed upon her and not at all about her will.
exactly. And so this is something that you know it there's boundaries to it because it can't really become like they can't just like run off and get married. Like what
No.
would she do? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So there there's it really is just about two people needing closeness. And I think Alicent most of all needing someone who is just there for her.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially as we kind of move forward a little bit and we're going to see she'll she'll connect with Lara Strong and
Right.
he's going to tell her, "Yeah, we replaced all the servants." And then we get that scene of her in the bath and it's very shades of Macbeth. There
Yeah.
were bits of like Alicent with OCD in season 1 that we saw,
Yes.
but she sends all the servants out and it is this notion of they're not even my people anymore.
No, they're
Now
not.
they're Laris's people. And what do I know? Can I trust them? But then there's also the internalized guilt, that Macbeth hand washing as she's just kind of scrubbing and scrubbing at herself because she is a very pious person. It's really important to recognize that emotionally she's very rooted in the religion of the seven and that she would see this as a sin. That doesn't change that she's doing it. But I mean,
Mm.
how different is that from any of the lives that we all live? I mean, this is life. And I think it's part of what conveys we talked about it a little bit before we pushed record, but it's really humanizing the Greens in a way
Yes.
that otherwise it's very easy to other them. I mean, HBO is hanging everything on this big Team Green versus Team Black marketing campaign.
Right.
I feel like Team Green losing big time in the popular vote, LT.
They are fundamentally unlikable is their
Yeah, they
problem.
really are.
Uh like led by Allison and her, like two sons who are both psychopaths.
Let's not forget Machiavellian grandpa.
Oh my gosh, he's the worst.
He's absolutely the worst.
He is the worst. Like I, I know we'll get into it, but every single time that Aegon, who is allegedly the king, said any words during when he was holding court, this dude was like, nah, no, we're not doing it that way. We've already made plans. Just like, when? And with whom? What do you. I don't. Otto is. I just want to punch him in the face.
Yeah, he's that kind of guy.
Yeah. Like, there's nothing likable about him. Ever since the standoff that he had initially, like the first standoff at Dragonstone, where he was just calling Masseria every name but her actual name, I was like, yeah, no, this dude sucks.
He
And
totally sucks. Yeah.
but like, there's no one really other than Helena to root for.
It's tough. I mean, I think that, some of the conversation I've seen around House of the Dragon of this, is it better? Famously, you talked through verses, LT, and compared it explicitly to Game of Thrones in that way. And I've seen a lot of discourse around, is it better than Game of Thrones? And I think in a certain way, it's so much more character driven. We are so much more with the characters. We watch most of the major players like evolve over decades of their life. And even if we haven't had a ton of time with the Aemon Targaryens or the Aegon
Right.
Targaryens, we have enough clarity on their childhood to understand. Because I think the point that you bring about Alicent it's relevant for almost everybody in this story, which is that they had the powers that be kind of controlling their lives from their childhood. All of these people were shoved into these positions, not by their own choice and not by their own agency, but by the sheer nature of their fate, by whoever their parents were born to, and
Yes.
this kind of indoctrination that they get. And the whole thing is like a snowball rolling downhill, just gaining more momentum. And the man who pushed the snowball off the hill is Otto Hightower, right? As he complains to Alicent about things didn't go the way we wanted in the hours after Viserys' death. It's like, dude, you precipitated all of this. You just started
Right.
this whole chaotic shit show that's going to throw the realm into war. And you're
Right.
complaining that you weren't able to spin every plate perfectly.
Yeah, you had also planned. You had plans of what you were going to do when Viserys inevitably passed away.
Mhm.
Um, and then you went again to Dragonstone to try to manipulate and carry out those plans. So, someone who is both scheming and conniving and a perfectionist, I can't.
Yeah, it's
What
a
are you doing?
lot. It's a lot. So let's talk about the Targaryen kids a little bit. The supposed king, Aegon Targaryen, as we're going to get a little view of him. He's going to take baby boy to work. I love that he has no clue where the kid is during the day as he comes to his sister wife, Helena, and is like, "Where's
Oh
my
my
son?"
gosh.
But
Yeah.
he takes little Jaehaerys to the small council. He almost gets a pony ride from the master of coin. I love this whole small council scene. But what's your take on Aegon and what we kind of see of him trying to find his place as a ruler? Given again, the context here is really relevant, but this kid didn't grow up thinking he would be the king, which I think
No.
is really important for us to keep in mind. This is all like a late day change in plans for him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen his character behind closed doors or lack thereof.
Mhm.
He is not a good person.
In
He is an
front of open
evil
windows,
person.
yeah, he is.
And what he did to that servant in season 1 is always going to be something that I think of whenever I think of him, because that is the way that he decides to move throughout the world, just being rich and knowing that he's the son of the king and that no one can really give him any consequences for his actions. So it's really interesting to see. We talked about this before we started recording, how they are trying to humanize the Greens,
Mhm.
um, to get the audience to sympathize when these horrible things happen. So one thing that we do see is something that we never saw with Viserys and Aegon, which is him taking an interest in his son's life and bringing him to the small council and saying, "This is all going to be yours one day. Here, treated accordingly," basically. And then they have a child off, where they both act like children, to amuse the other. Only one of them is an actual baby. So there's that part, and then there's him bringing his brother in, like realizing that his brother is one of the best fighters that they have
Mhm.
and is strategic as well, while completely ignoring everything that Alicent has to say. I think that Alicent really believed that she was going to have Aegon's ear and underestimated the amount that her father would take her place in that matter, because she can't physically be there all the time while he is ruling, where because she's not a man, whereas her
Mhm.
father can be. Just like proximity to the king is so important in this show. But yeah, I really do think that they're trying to humanize Aegon a little bit and like show that he has an actual bond with his children, at least, uh, that his father never had. with
I
him.
thought they did a great job, just those 2 scenes, and then him kind of receiving, in court, when he has, like, the supplicants coming and the small
Hmm.
folk, everything with the kind of herd, and we're gonna meet Hugh the Hammer, the blacksmith who needs to get paid for the scorpions, but I thought they did a really good job because, again, this is a kid that, like, we don't like him by the sheer nature of his
No.
position, but this is not a Joffrey, this is not a
Right.
full-tilt grasping power monger that
Which
was
is
desperate
wild.
for this position. They share a lot of commonalities, and I don't think that he's a charitable or redeemable individual. But we can see where he's trying to fulfill this kind of term that they give him in his announcement of Aegon the Magnanimous, which I just thought was like such a hilarious, a very funny episode in what is like probably the darkest bit of TV that we got so far this year. I mean,
Yeah.
like they really kept us laughing until that final sequence.
My favorite Aegon scene in the entire episode is when he's just with his like Sex in the City crew
He's chilling with the boys.
on the throne for some reason. That's where you hang out. And he's just like, no one even knows what magnanimous means.
It is great though, because it does really, to the point again, just humanize this kid as a kid, right? And
Yeah.
he's just hanging out with his boys in the throne room. Like, what are you talking about, man? You got to say something these people understand. And I think the notion of him as a caring father, because he's clearly not a caring husband. I mean, he treats
No.
his sister wife not terrifically, but he's got love and admiration for this kid. And I know they talked about it a little bit in the after the episode thing there that Jaehaerys, or I'm sorry, Viserys never did this for him, that he was
Right.
never brought to small council meetings, that he was born to this old king very late in his life. And
Mhm.
that at that point, they had already, presumably, to Viserys's mind, settled the kind of the questions of rulership and inheritance, and
Right.
that Rhaenyra was locked in. She was the one who got all the care and the love and the attention from a doting father, and that he was totally overlooked. And it's a little like, it rolls downhill. All the best sociopathic kings of Westeros have daddy issues, LT. you know? I
Yeah.
loved it. I thought it was a really good setup for these guys. Like going back to Dragonstone, Rhaenyra has been scouring the coast looking for whatever remnants she can find until here they go. She will find this wing out on the coast. She flies down. She discovers the cloak of her son. She has this very kind of public break in front of the small folk. And that's going to lead her back to Dragonstone, where she has the one line of the episode:
Yes.
bring me Aemon Targaryen. This one shot of her coming into the council room and you hear the Kingsguard announcing her before she's in the room. This was electric, LT. This is like just good filmmaking.
Yes. Honestly, Emma Darcy does such an amazing job as Rhaenyra. Given that they only have one line during the entirety of the episode, we get so heartbroken just watching Rhaenyra have to, you know, clutch the cloak of her dead son and, like the wing of his dragon. And then there's also the fact, isn't Arax, who was this dragon,
Arax.
Cyrax's
Yep.
baby?
Yes.
So you get the idea that both the dragon and Rhaenyra are mourning at the same time, and they're bonded, so they're feeling each other's mourning. It's really difficult to watch
Mm-hmm.
uh, someone be in so much anguish, and we see her move throughout this episode, just in grief and trying her best to make sense of what has happened around her. And from, an acting standpoint, it's just like, get that Emmy ready.
Yeah, for real. They do carry an incredible amount of weight in the silence, the kind of pain of it all. The whole notion of Cyrax as Rhaenyra's dragon is she laid a lot of the eggs. So a lot of the
Mm,
younger hatchlings are Cyrax's offspring in that way. The dragon count is interesting, but this is
mhm.
important to note that all the dragons are being ridden by the most important players on the board, right? And this is
Yeah.
a really kind of big issue that's inhibiting a lot of the battle in that way also. But I just thought it's like such a perfect synergy of all the stuff. The writing is good. It's conveying these kind of great moments. It gives us just a little bit more of the world building. Something I felt like was missing in season one was the travel montages of Game of Thrones. We spent so much time, we
Right.
joked about it, on the road in Game of Thrones and
Yes.
dealing with peasants and extras and the kind of rotating cast of small folk, right?
Right.
And House of the Dragon season one, for all that it did well, it felt a little bit smaller in that way.
They've
So
got private jets, Rich.
oh, yeah, really. It's just true. They are jet set right over there. Much smaller carbon footprint, I guess, except for the sheep, I guess.
You're a sheep during this time, it's over.
Yeah, for real. You don't want to be a shepherd in Westeros. Very bad career path, you know. But it sets us up well for everything that we're going to get later as Jace kind of comes back and we have
Oh
the
my
funeral
gosh.
here. And he and Rhaenyra together, the two of them so like poised and sophisticated. They have to maintain this kind of silhouette of like honor. They have to remain implacable in front of everybody else. But these two just melting into each other's arms, it was heartbreaking. It really got me.
That was really bad.
Right?
When Jace's voice cracked, when he was trying to tell Rhaenyra, give her a report basically of what he had accomplished, and then they just like fell into each other's arms. The score didn't help, I will say, with the tears that flowed during that particular period of time.
It's surgical. It's like a surgical extraction of pain.
Yeah. And then when we get to the funeral and we see a glimpse at, first of all, we see little Joffrey with the toy that Lucerys used to play with, and I was like, oh no, that's awful. But then we also see is it Rhaena, who was betrothed to Lucerys, and she's just like, what the hell am I gonna do now?
Yes.
It's really crappy. It's just, this episode is so sad. The whole episode is terrible.
It's incredibly sad. I mean, I think it's easy to like lose the context, but all of this is happening within 7 days of her father died. She gave birth to a stillborn baby.
After she went into labor because of all of the turmoil surrounding the fact that her father died and her brother was made king.
Buried her father, buried an infant, buried her son. I mean, this is like it's a bad situation for Rhaenyra Targaryen. She's unpacking a lot and she seems pretty well composed for all that it's worth. And we haven't talked about him much, but another like major player here is Corlys, the sea snake. And we have the one little scene of him going down to the shipyard. We're going to meet Alan Valerian as he's like ultimately talking about getting his ship back into play. But this whole notion that like he lost his heir too, right?
Yeah.
And that his son is dead, his son-in-law is dead. What is he going to do with this life? And he's like battered and damaged, as is his ship. That's a bit of like a metaphor for where House Valerian finds itself. Like in the beginning of season one, they were one of the preeminent kind of powers in the realm, and while they still are, they've taken a lot of hits for their stance with Rhaenyra here. And poor Corlys is like straggling to hold on to anything. I love the whole House Valerian arc. I do too.
And I am really excited to see exactly what it is that Alan is going to do. Because I haven't read the books. I just have watched way too many YouTube videos to not know some spoilers.
Sure.
But I want to know what Alan of Hull is going to do. That actor is just kind of mesmerizing on screen.
It's father from Raised by Wolves. I was so delighted. I didn't recognize him at first because he was in the silver bodysuit on Raised by Wolves.
That's wild.
But it's father. I was so excited.
I did not know that was him. That's awesome. I was just taken by the energy that he was putting out on screen, like very Gendry Baratheon kind of like stalwart, but like, you can trust him. And I want to know what is ahead with this guy, because he seems like he doesn't, take any shit from anyone.
Yeah, no spoilers for the books, but just pro tip for any listeners out there. If you hear the name of the character on the episode, probably pay attention to them. Hugh the blacksmith, Alan of Hull, these people may be relevant later, I would expect. I just wanted to stop it on that before we hit the final beat, as ultimately kind of Rhaenyra does make this proclamation. She wants Aemon Targaryen. Everybody's going to kind of respond. The White Worm, Bissaria. She's trying to kind of skulk her way out of King's Landing, but she gets picked up as a stowaway and brought back to Dragonstone, where Daemon's going to confront her. And she played this kind of pivotal role in helping to find Aegon the morning of the coronation. After Viserys died, this is really important in the books too. It's about these kind of symbols of power. Aegon is in King's Landing. He's at the Iron Throne. Like being able to seat him in the throne the morning after the king died is a really important symbol to the small folk to convey who actually has power, right? You could go back to like the Varys riddle from Game of Thrones of like who really holds the power, the sword, the king, the what, but it's all about belief. Ultimately, you need the small folk to accept whoever is going to be the king. So Daemon confronts Massaria. There's a little bit of back and forth. I love how ultimately Eric is going to like defend her a little bit, but this is going to lead Daemon back to King's Landing, where he will connect with this old gold cloak blood and the rat catcher cheese to set up one of the most infamous kind of scenes from the books, and what may well be the most harrowing moment that we've seen in Westeros on television.
When that asshole kicked that dog.
Yeah, it was when he kicked that dog. I knew the second that I saw the dog, I'm like, they're just putting this dog here for him to kick him, and I'm going to be so mad. Why'd they bring that dog out? Just so he could kick him? Just so he could kick him.
When I saw them enter, first of all, shit's about to go down when Daemon puts on his murdering cloak.
Oh, yeah. He gets his little Kermit Darkside hood up, and it's going down.
When they walked in with the dog, I was like, what? For what purpose? Why? And then they kicked the dog. And I know that there's a such thing as an actual kick the dog moment, but this was unnecessary. We already know they're bad people. We already got it.
I'm with you. It felt to me like the murdering the infant was pretty on point. I know it's not an infant, it's a toddler, but like the dog felt like a real extra bridge that we didn't need to build there. I get the dog. He's a rat catcher. He's got a terrier. He's kicking around. They're trying to like hold up appearances. They're setting traps the whole way. But I did get really mad when it became clear we just brought the dog to kick him. So the book readers have been waiting for this, and there's been a lot of discourse today in terms of how it was portrayed. The sound design is chilling. I think when we talk about good acting, Helena as a character has not had a ton of huge moments, but Fia Sabin as the actress, she just like nailed this moment so effectively. The pure kind of terror again with this like long shot, just her silently kind of racing back to her mother's room with her daughter clutched in her arms. It was very effective to me. It felt very effective to me.
Right.
But they turned the dial back a good deal from the content as it's presented in the books. It is an even more kind of harrowing, perilous moment.
Yes.
And I'm curious how it landed for you. Did you have any idea this was coming after your deep dives down the YouTube?
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Couldn't get away from blood and cheese content if I tried.
The internet is dark and full of terrors, tread lightly out there, my friends.
It's very true. There are many things you just don't want to know, but they're all available on the internet.
That's true.
When are people, a couple things. When are people going to start listening to Helena? After the whole Beast Beneath the Boards thing, I would just have someone follow her around and write down what she says so that I could eat it.
For real, it's a little bit of the Cassandra trip, right? Of the whole idea that she's cursed with prophecy and she's cursed for nobody to ever believe the prophecy. It goes back to even the kind of weaving as we talk about it. And the Wheel of Time is the magic system in the Wheel of Time is all about weaving. And this is a traditionally kind of feminine practice in the ancient past, right? That they would be cast with weaving and that whole notion. But Helena is a very tragic character in the midst of
Yeah.
this ensemble of really tragic characters.
Yeah. Second of all, you are in the middle of a war for all intents and purposes. Like your brother just killed the son of the actual heir, right?
Yep.
But yet security nowhere to be found. What?
It's an issue. So in the text, there is this rift that happens in the Kingsguard, right? As Rhaenyra bounces, a couple of the Kingsguard go with her. So we didn't really address this beyond the Eric and Eric thing in
Right.
the books, but I think that we should probably imagine they're not at full strength. And full strength is only 7 guys. It's not, it seems like a very big castle for 7 guys, you
Huge,
know?
yeah.
So we're down a couple of key players, but it is clearly notable that one, Kristen Cole, was not where he was supposed to be and big time dropped the ball here.
Yeah. Jeez. The the double whammy of having to watch at, first of all, point out your son just to try to keep yourself and your daughter alive, and then and make that kind of Sophie's choice, as it were, and then flee with your only remaining child to your mother's room where she is bouncing on the high tower of the guy who's supposed to be keeping anything from happening to you and your children. That is a lot to unpack. And I don't think they had therapists back in the day.
No, they definitely did not. Is there a maester chain for psychology? It just all works so well because you have Kristen and Eamon like broing down. These two, oh my god, like what a pair of bros too. Like like totally tracks for me of these idiots like sitting up, drinking
Right.
late,
Of
being
course they're
machismo.
friends.
And Otto's gonna roll in and be like, go back to your position. And Kristen's like not wearing his armor, the sword's off on the side of the room. He kind of lazily, drunkenly gets a hold of it as Otto comes in the room, like, oh, what might this be? Do I need to defend my prince? You know? And so I think it's just so much more of an indictment. It really sets up Alicent in a powerful way with the survivor's guilt
Right.
of the fact that she pulled him away from his sworn duty, and it just indicts the pair of them that much more for this kind
Right.
of sin that they've both thrown themselves into. In the books, it's much more harrowing. There is this notion that every night Helena goes to bring the children to say goodnight to Alicent. And
Oh.
they are tactically going to wait for the children. It is not oh, go kill Aemond. And if you can't find him, then just get one of the other boys.
Right.
It's a son for a son is kind of what we get conveyed. Let me just ask, do you get the impression that Gaiman gave them the directive to like kill one of the children if they couldn't find Aemon? Because
That
that's the
seems like
big question, right?
that seems exactly like something Damon would do.
Agreed.
For better or for worse, mostly for worse recently. Damon does not care. He said in the last season, I would rather feed my children to the dragons than have them carry cups for that usurper king. And I completely believe him.
I mean, he condemns Rhaenyra for her grief here. The mother grieves and the queen shirks her duties, right? There's a
Right.
guy who is not processing the emotional impact of these events in a normal way or a human
No,
way, right?
he just immediately decided that they killed Viserys, and so he wants revenge for that more than anything.
Oh, for
And
sure. That's definitely part of it.
and he's willing to sacrifice whomever is on the other side. He doesn't care about them as people at all. So I completely believe that he would give the go ahead for them to just kill any son.
Me too. And I think that we all should accept that going forward. I don't think we're supposed to be absolving Damon of responsibility here. I think the complication is how much is Rhaenyra guilty for this, right? This notion that she did not send them on this mission. This is kind of
Right.
him going off script, right?
Yeah,
But
he
in the
went rogue.
text, right? In the text, Blood and Cheese go to Alicent's room where they then kill the maids and wait for Helena to arrive with the children. And in the books, there is a third child. They have a younger son named Maelor. So there are these two boys. And when Helena comes in with the two sons, Blood and Cheese are like, look, it doesn't matter. They don't need to kill the
Right.
heir. They just need to take one of the sons. And they say, pick. Which one do you want to live? And so Helena picks the younger of the two to die. She
Yeah.
picks the heir to live, and they kill the heir. The one that she picked to die is the one that they leave alive. So it really, like, it's much worse. It is a
Yeah.
much darker Sophie's Choice. And I've seen, some of the discourse about why they pulled it back. I think it's a little bit more complicated and you could lose some of the details there. Part of it is that we just have not introduced this third kid. Like,
Right.
Helena and Aegon have a brother who is not on the
It's
show.
not in the show.
And he may well turn up on the show. He's a pretty important player in the dance. So we just have to economically tell the story. I think the other half of it is like you and I have been talking about. There's this notion where we want to kind of humanize these people a little bit. If we make them too irredeemable, it'll like nobody will be on anybody's side. So they really do dial back the intentionality of Blood and Cheese and Damon in everything that kind of happens here. And they ease off some of the trauma that Helena comes out of this with. But I thought it was still just as effective. I mean, I can complain, like, do it beat for beat. Is it better in the books? Yeah. But
Yeah,
I get why they did this, and I thought
I
it
do
was
too.
perfectly effective. This was chilling.
It was terrible, and like you mentioned earlier, the sounds
Oh,
coming from that room were absolutely horrible. Just the look on Helena's face right before she goes to pick up her daughter and run, uh just the trauma that that is on display here is so difficult to come to terms with. So
mhm.
much so that when she runs into Allison's room, she barely has to say anything for Allison to understand that something truly terrible has happened.
That
It's
line read, "They killed the boy." She can't even get his
I
name out.
know.
It's so powerful. It's really resonant, and it's just such Game of Thrones, LT, that, the credits and the music soars, and I'm like, "God damn it, they did it
They
again.
did it
How
again.
can it not be next Sunday?" I'm, like, dying over here. This was a very good start. It felt to me
Yes.
like pretty much a level up on every front, from the production and the
It looked
wigs to the
beautiful.
score to the opening credits to, like, season one, for whatever it's worth, is a preamble. I mean, half of the season is covered in literally like 2 pages of text in this 500-page tome. So in that way, we're like in the heat of it now, and I'm just so excited to see where we go from here.
Yeah, this is great. I can't wait to see what Rhaenyra's reaction to this mess is going to be, because this is clearly not what she wanted. Uh, she is grieving and she is pissed, and she wants Aemon's head on a platter, but I don't think that she wanted a small child murdered. You know?
I tend to be with you. I think that she's not going to take this news really well, and that's part of what's so fun. Just as somebody that has read the books, to see the show, we're getting to see all the stuff that is not depicted and the emotional reactions. And now that we've established some really talented actors in these roles,
Mhm.
it's very exciting to get to
Yes.
think about all of the spaces in between the moments that we're going to get to stop down in and kind of see the fallout from these people. Is there anything that I didn't hit that you wanted to stop down on before we part ways for the week, LT? There was so much to unpack this episode.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited for where things are going. I would like to know how they're going to handle Lady Erin's request, because she wants a dragon to patrol her lands.
Mhm.
I want to see um the Stark men, even though they're graybeards, fight with all the might of a Northerner. I want to see how Alicent is going to react to all of this, because the thing that she seems most concerned about is the fact that she's been writing letters to Rhaenyra, letters that they probably haven't even sent,
Right.
honestly.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that all of the communication at the Red Keep goes through Otto is really sinister.
Feels pretty bad. That one beat of, did she get my letter? And the guy's like, an apology for her dead son. Like, I love that like reaction of everybody else to her, these letters.
I want to see that terrible Lannister rejoice at that child's funeral because that was his one op in the show.
Yeah, for real. For real, Aegon is the heir to the throne, bothering you, Lord Tywin. It's really exciting. I think, this episode, again, that you had so many of the boys, especially these dragon riders, are like ready to go throw down. They're talking about how this is going to end in violence. Doesn't Alicent realize that? And it feels like, given what we saw of Aegon and his affection for his sweet son, Jaehaerys, that he's not going to respond to this well, and the issue is going to hit the fan next week. I just wanted to take a minute to address the dragons, because this is like the House of the Dragon.
Right.
The dragons are like these major pieces in the war. I imagine next week we may talk about it a little bit more, but just for the context here. So Aemond has Vhagar, and then King Aegon has Sunfire himself. Those are the two prominent battle-ready dragons on Team Black. In the books, Helena has a dragon named Dreamfire, but I don't think we've ever actually seen Helena on
she has it in the show. We haven't seen her on Dragonback, but she talks about the dragon.
So, but this is notable to me, right? Because again, it just comes down to like the three people with the dragons on the sides of the Greens are literally the three most important people on the team, right? It's the king, his brother, and his sister wife. And his sister wife, it seems like, is she going to respond to this by jumping on her dragon and immediately going to war? Or is it going to be something else? Notably, those are the only real three that the Greens have going for them. There is this third or fourth Targaryen sibling that theoretically is down in Oldtown, Daeron, and he may show up. I'm really curious if the show's going to bring this guy in or not, because I think it could work, but also it will be very confusing for the audiences. So I suspect they don't.
I read somewhere they weren't going to.
It seems like they wouldn't, right? It just would be so confusing. But that's really the problem, is that the Greens have only like 2.5 dragons for all intents and purposes, where when you go to the Blacks, you have Daemon is on Caraxes, you have Rhaenys is on Meleys, you have Rhaenyra is on Syrax, and then Rhaenyra's 3 sons, one of them is now dead. Arrax and Luke are gone, but Jace rides Vermax, and then even little Joffrey has a dragon, and one of the Valerian kids has a dragon. So there's already like 5, 6 on the other side, and it is just disproportionate numbers, which I think is important for us in terms of like context to keep in mind going forward.
Yes, that's really important. I mean, the problem is that Vhagar is a beast.
Yes. And not most of these dragons have not seen battle, right? Vhagar has seen a million battles. He literally came over with the Conqueror and is just overwhelmingly larger than even the next biggest one.
Yeah. Like, they could just have Vhagar eat the other ones like she did with Arrax. It's really overwhelming, because Vhagar seems to make up for the fact that they don't have more dragons on the green side.
Yep, 100%. And so I think that part of what, I spend a lot of time doing fantasy war and Dungeons and Dragons. This is my day job, LT. But I think part of what we need to be thinking about, just as a discerning audience going forward, is it's very much a game of Battleship, of where are these dragons going to turn up. You don't know where they are. You have to defend key locations. And so it's a lot about the kind of maneuverability and where they're going to be and how you're going to deploy them in this war to come. I had a lot of folks hitting me up in the DMs about the dragons, which is why I wanted to stop down on it. But that's pretty much my 2 cents. I thought it was electric, and I am just shot out of a the canon for next week. I'm really excited that I get to hang out with you every week to talk through this, LT. But I'm just really excited that we get 2 months back in Westeros this summer.
Yay.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, it's there's so much to love about this this time. Like the response on social media is always fantastic to see as you're watching the show. It's just a great time to be alive. We've got House of the Dragon, the bear is coming, the boys are back, and the Olympics are coming.
Ooh.
So I'm gonna have a good summer.
We do love an Olympic summer. I'm at DM Philly in all the places, at Screen Page Potter, the social medias for the podcast. Go give those a follow. Find the link tree. Come join us in the Discord. It is a very cool place. There's going to be the episodes 1 through 3 of season 4 of The Boys coming to you later this week with me and Kevin. Taylor Ball and I are breaking down Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves over on What Did I Miss? And next week, the Wheel of Time Book Club is back with the first section of book 2, The Great Hunt. We are reading the first 7 chapters of book 2, and we're going to break it down for you next week. That's what I'm up to this week, LT. Where are you at, and what are you up to? Where can people find you out there on the internet?
I am going to be talking about the season finale of Top Chef this week. So that's very exciting. We've had a really good and interesting season with some worthy competitors. So that'll be fun. And then also at RHAP, I'm going to be on the Perfect Match podcast because you can't really have a fun summer without putting some dummies and thoughts into a house with each other.
Dummies and Thoughts, summer of 2024. That's us. We will be back next week talking about House of the Dragon, season 2, episode 2. But until then, just remember, winter is coming.